and welcome to the board meeting of the 21st of April. You will note that I am not the convener. Unfortunately, our convener is very ill in hospital at this time, so we will need to appoint a pro-convener today, pro-temp convener. But before that, I just have the following to say. Please note that the board meeting is being live streamed and will be recorded and published online for public viewing after the meeting. Can members activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking? Please do not come in during items unless the convener invites you to do so. Can I confirm that all members have been able to access the papers for today's meeting in advance? I'll take silence as yes. If members wish to speak on any point, please notify the convener via the instant message function in the Skype meeting invite, or if you have dialed into the meeting, indicate by stating your name and the item you wish to speak on, and you will be brought in at an appropriate time. If members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, please alert the Deputy Clerk by Skype instant message if possible. Support will be available from an ICT officer during the meeting if required, and our IT support officer today is Diego Alves. Comfort breaks will be scheduled throughout the meeting at appropriate times. So before I take the sediment, board members, can I invite you to appoint a pro-temp convener, and I would ask you to appoint the pro-temp convener to act as convener until such time as Brian is able to take up the reins again once he's fit and able to do so, as we have quite a lot of occasionals for the opening of licensed premises after lockdown that may require us to contact and consult with the convener. So I'd seek nominations. Mr. Argyle.
Thank you. I'm just trying to put my video on as well. I've been a good boy. There we go. Yes, good morning. Thank you for that. May I suggest that we ask Mrs. Maren Jensen to take the chair for this meeting, and indeed until such time as Brian is back with us, and in doing so I hope that will be very soon, and I'm sure along with the rest of the board we send our best wishes to Brian and hope for a very speedy recovery. But I would certainly for now propose Maren Jensen for the temporary convener, or pro-temp convener if you prefer.
Thank you for that. Ms. Harper, I see you're indicating you're going to second that. Are there any other nominations? Last chance, in which case I hereby appoint at your nomination and agreement Mrs. Jensen to convener and invite her to take over for the rest of the meeting. Mrs. Jensen.
Yes, thank you and good morning, and I'm happy to accept that role, but I would just like to state that we obviously send our best wishes to Mr. Brian Topping and hope he has a speedy recovery from his illness. We need to start by taking the sediment. Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate whether you're present when I call your name. Mr. Argyle.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Mr. Calder.
Present.
Mrs. Jensen.
Present.
Mr. Forsyth.
Present.
Ms. Harper.
Present.
Mr. Hutchison.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Mrs. Stirling.
Present.
We have apologies from Mr. Topping. Mr. Wilson.
Good morning.
Can I also confirm the following officers are in attendance? Mr. Simpson.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, present.
Ms. Cadini has put her apologies in. Mr. Lackey.
Present.
Ms. Ward.
Present.
Sergeant Flett.
Present.
And we also have in attendance Delcia Borland and Beatrice Hay as administrative officers. You will also see Jenny Mearn's photograph. She's in the meeting for the purposes of conducting the live streaming through Teams. That's the end of the sediment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the business today, I think we need to mark the retirement of Peter Robertson. I'm going to ask Mr. Argyle, who's worked closely with him at the South Licensing Board, to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. Thank you for that. I know that Mr. Topping was very keen for the board to record its thanks, and indeed his personal thanks, to Peter Robertson for the work that he did as Deputy Clerk for a number of years, and particularly for the South Aberdeenshire Board back in the old days when we had the South Aberdeenshire Licensing Board. Peter was Deputy Clerk there for about 8 or 9 years, and having been the convener for most of that time, it was a great pleasure working with him. He was extremely effective, diligent, and very pleasant to work with over that time. So I know that the convener, Mr. Topping, is very keen to wish Peter all the very best in his early retirement. Looking at it from the point of view of my vast age, it seems absurd that people are retiring so young, but there you go. But I know everybody will join with me in passing on the convener's best wishes to Peter Robertson, and hope that he has a very long, happy and successful retirement. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Argyle. I'm sure everybody will join in your best wishes to Peter. Now move on to declaration of members' interests. If any members' interests they wish to declare today, please indicate in the chat box if you've got an interest to declare. No, I see no indications. We shall move on to the equalities resolution. Can members please indicate that they agree the resolution?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Are all agreed? I'll take silence as agreement. Item 4, approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Please agree the minute as an accurate record of the meeting on the 24th of February 2021. Are there any issues with the minute?
Chair, I believe there's a spelling mistake to correct, but subject to that being corrected, it's presented as a correct record.
Okay. Mr. Forsyth, did you have a comment?
The clerk has indicated correctly, and that is now attended. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right, we move on to item 5, applications for premises licence non-contentious. We're going to go through these in turn. If I ask the Deputy Clerk to take us through the paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to share my screen because the report circulated with your papers was subsequently amended, and the individual report has been updated on the website, but unfortunately the report in your papers was not, and there is an additional application in the amended report that is not in your papers. So please confirm when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's it.
And it's showing a blue table, yeah?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes.
First application, Chair, is for Netherdale House at Netherdale and Turriff, and this is to offer on and off sales primarily as a conference function facility for receptions, events, weddings, and to allow picnics and hampers on their extensive grounds. And the on-sale hours are within policy between 9 and 1 7 days a week, and the standard off-sale hours. Police Scotland recommended several specific conditions which have been accepted by the applicant, as has the LSO, and building standards confirmed the maximum capacity is 150, and the fire service submitted their usual standard submission Commission. Certificate of compliance has been submitted, and the recommended conditions for the licence are as set out in the report. The local conditions numbers 1 to 8 and conditions specific to the licence at numbers 9 and 10. There are no other outstanding issues, and this is ready to be granted.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions or comments? Please indicate. I'm not seeing any indication. In that case, are members happy to grant that application?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you. The second application is for Kinnaird Head Whiskies in Fraserburgh, and this is for an online off-sales business from a dwelling house in Fraserburgh, and it's for the standard off-sale hours. Police Scotland made specific conditions, recommended specific conditions. They've been accepted, as did the LSO, and the LSO also noted that capacity should be 38.61 on the operating plan. Again, that has been corrected. Certificate of compliance has been submitted. The agreed recommended licences, the local conditions are 1 to 5 as listed, and the specific conditions are 6 through to 13. And there are no other outstanding issues, and therefore it's recommended that this be granted.
Okay, members, any comments or questions? Okay, happy to grant this application?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, granted.
Agreed. Thank you, Chair. The third application is for Ellen Spirit Company in Ellen, and again this is another residential property, and this licence is solely for the sale of alcohol online, and they will be made online and delivered to the buyer's home address. No display of alcohol in the building and no customers entering the building, and it's for the standard off-sale hours. Again, police and LSO recommended several local conditions. The LSO also asked for clarification of the description of the premises, which was done. The certificate of compliance has been submitted, and you can see that the recommended conditions are 1 to 5 from the local conditions, and the specific conditions are 6 and 7. And there are no other outstanding issues, and this is recommended for approval.
Okay, members, no comments
Happy
or
with that one,
questions? Okay, that was
Chair.
granted as well.
The next application is for TJ's Pizzas, and there are several corrections to be made to this report. For some reason, some of the representations miscopied for this, so I can advise you that this is subject to the following corrections. The Police Scotland recommended conditions related to Challenge 25 and an age verification system for delivery or collection of alcohol, which the applicant has agreed to. In relation to the Licensing Standards Officer's comments, this section should be deleted and replaced with the LSO has recommended several local and specific conditions which have been accepted by the applicant, covered in the proposed condition section in this report. The Certificate of Compliance section should read that the applicant has not submitted the certificate of compliance in relation to the display of the site notice, and in relation to the proposed conditions, in relation to the local conditions, there's the addition of the local conditions 7 to 11 relating to children and young persons, and then there is removal of the first condition here, which should be numbered 6. The numbering hasn't reset. This is not relevant to this application and has been deleted. So this application still has a certificate of compliance outstanding, so it is recommended that the board grant the licence in principle, subject to receipt of the certificate of compliance.
Okay, any questions from members? Granting in principle.
Agreed.
Do members agree?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you.
And I've lost Craig's Glen wedding venue again. I can advise that this premises is purely for weddings. It relates to an area with 3 tents that will be erected, 1 for wedding ceremonies, 1 for receptions and 1 for a drinks tent. There are several conditions recommended for this application. I can get those if you want to defer this to the end of the meeting. I can pull those up from our licensing system. There's a specific condition which the applicant has agreed to, that the licence will not be able to be used unless there is a connection to the public water supply, and that was at the request of Environmental Health. So if you wish to see further details of that, I will pull those out and give those to you at the end of the meeting if you wish to defer this. I would rather you actually saw on screen what was required rather than just go on my say-so, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I would suggest that we defer that until the end of the meeting because we would like to see the information. Do members agree?
Agreed.
Great, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. That brings us to the end of this item.
Okay.
I'll just stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, applications for major variations, non-contentious. Deputy Clerk, are you ready to take us through those?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The first application is for the Maze Supermarket in Fraserburgh. They are seeking to actually reduce their off sales by half an hour throughout the week, but are also adding seasonal variations to be able to open on local holidays, and are adding alcohol deliveries for in-store customers only, no remote sales, and they've also upgraded their shop front layout, requiring an amended layout plan. Representations were made by the LSO and Police Scotland recommending local conditions and specific conditions, and if you look at section 6 of the report on page 39, the recommended local conditions are listed, as are the specific conditions. Again, this one is recommended to be granted in principle, subject to receipt of the certificate of compliance regarding display of the site notice. The applicant has agreed all of the recommended conditions.
Okay, I don't see any indication from members. Are members agreeing to grant the application?
Agreed.
Great, yeah. Great.
Thank you, Chair. Next application is for the Market Bar in Stonehaven. No change to the bulk of their on-sale hours, with the exception of extension on a Sunday morning to open from 11 rather than from 12:30. They're adding off-sale hours from 11 till 10 throughout the week, and they are going to serve bar snacks and meals, and they've also added indoor and outdoor sports as an activity due to the installation of a darts board. Certificate of compliance has been submitted, and the applicant has accepted all of the proposed conditions, which are shown at the bottom of page 41. There are no specific conditions in respect of this application.
Okay, again, I don't see any queries from members. Are we minded to grant this application?
Great. Approved.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. The next application is for the Watermill Service Station at Fraserburgh. As you can see, there are no change to the core hours as they have the maximum already, but there's been a substantial reworking of the actual premises at the service station, which has led to an increased alcohol capacity, shop opening at 6 AM for non-alcohol related business, new layout, new storage unit and additional activities. The certificate of compliance has been submitted, and the applicant has agreed to the proposed conditions, which are shown on page 43, and again there are no specific conditions to the application, just recommended local conditions.
Are members minded to agree and grant the application?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. That brings us to the end of this report.
Now we move on to item 7, provisional premises licence. It's a hearing for the Arc Cinema at Peterhead. I presume the licence holder is still in the meeting because he was in at the start. Yes.
As Chair, we have Stephen McGowan as agent, and we also have the applicant in observing the meeting.
Okay.
If I could introduce this report, Chair, this is a slightly unusual report for the board in that there are no outstanding representations. They've all been dealt with to the satisfaction of the consultees that made them. The only reason that this is before you as a hearing rather than as a non-contentious application is that the applicant is seeking to trade on 6 days a year to 3 a.m. 3 a.m. in terms of the board's policy is normally reserved for nightclubs, with 1 o'clock opening for the remainder of the premises. As you will see from your papers, Mr McGowan has already put in some written explanation, but the reason for the hearing is to seek to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to justify a departure to policy in this case. The applicant has agreed to an additional condition in relation to the hours if the board opts to grant them, that they would notify Police Scotland and the LSOs a month in advance of the dates on which the extended opening hours would apply. So, Chair, in relation to the procedure for this application, it would be to hear Mr McGowan, ask any questions of Mr McGowan, invite him to make concluding remarks before reaching a determination as to whether or not this departure from policy is justified. All other aspects of the major variation are classed as the provisional premises licence, are classed as non-contentious, and the application is otherwise ready to grant. So I would invite Mr McGowan to make his presentation to the board.
Can I just come in first there before Mr McGowan starts, just to let everybody know who's in the meeting that the board meeting is recorded and published online for public viewing after the meeting. So just so that people are aware. Okay, I'll ask Mr McGowan. I see he is present. Would you like to address the board, Mr McGowan?
Thank you, Madam Convener, and thank you to Fiona for the introduction of the application. I think that was very helpful in setting the context. Your Honours, good morning. It's nice to speak with you all and to present this slightly unusual and unique request. As you've heard, I'm accompanied by Laura Daramola, who's here to observe and is the General Manager for the Arc Cinema. I can also just say that I would add my best wishes to Councillor Topping for a speedy recovery as well. Your Honours, you'll have heard here from Fiona in relation to the various reports that I think the application itself is fairly uncontentious, and it's just this special 3 a.m. request that we've built in that will require a bit of explanation, which of course I'll go on to give very shortly. I thought it might be helpful just to very briefly give you a moment's context for the application and the applicant. Arc Cinemas, Your Honours, are a UK and Ireland cinema operator, and perhaps unusually in the current climate, are building new cinema premises. They tend to stay away from large city centre areas and look for areas perhaps where there's no cinema provision, or where there may have been a cinema in the past but which has not traded for some time. The Peterhead premises is the first in Scotland for this company, and hopefully a fantastic boon for the local community. Some of your honours may have seen the premises since the works have been done, and some of you will know that the council granted the cinema licence some months ago now, but of course the pandemic has delayed, the proper opening of the premises itself. It has 5 cinema screens, all kitted out, state-of-the-art sound and soundproofing, and it's also fully accessible as well. It's an investment of some 2.25 million, and the cinema has created 12 new jobs for the area, including Laura's position as the General Manager, who's watching with us today. I was thinking about this morning, and I'm struggling to think of another independent cinema opening in Scotland in recent times, so it's really a positive thing to see for Peterhead and for the North East. In terms of the alcohol offer, Your Honour, just by way of brief explanation, it's a very modest offer. a very small selection of different things, a couple of beers, a couple of wines. There's no bar in the premises, as I think your owners appreciate. And really the purpose of the alcohol licence is to allow alcohol to be consumed ancillary to the cinematic experience, to sit and have a wine or a beer whilst watching a movie. I'm glad to hear that there's no objections to the application in general, and we've hopefully gone about this the right way in speaking with the various officers and trying to answer any queries that they've had. Your Honours, that brings me to, I think, the real part of the conversation today, which is this unusual request for 3 AM 6 times a year. I think probably incumbent upon me to be clear with your Honours that we're not asking for a 3 AM licence per se. I think, as Fiona has correctly identified helpfully, we are asking for a 1 AM licence, but with this special bolt-on additional wording to activate 3 AM for special movie events on no more than 6 times a year. So the purpose of this bolt-on, your Honours, is to cater for infrequent, big sort of premiere movie events, which would be midnight showings. This is to cater for, you know, a large event-style movie. An example of this could be the new Bond film when it's eventually released, where there might be a lot of interest in it, and the cinema would like to do midnight showings, you know, midnight sort of kick-off of the cinematic experience. So the purpose of the 3 AM bolt-on, as I'm referring to it, is really to cater for those very infrequent occurrences of these sort of big premiere style events, to allow customers to go in and watch the movie as it kicks off at midnight, and to take a drink as an ancillary, as I said, to the movie. So it really is a special, you know, very restricted proposal and request in our regards. I'm also grateful that the clerk identified that we had proposed a condition to give your Honour some comfort in this regard with respect to notification to both the police and licensing standards as to when these movie events would be. And although neither of them have actually asked for the condition, I think it's the right thing to do to propose it. So that's something which I'm doing again now formally, to give that to your Honours, should you be with me in the 3 AM bolt-on. So it's something which I think is unusual. We are asking for this to be granted as an exception to your policy. It's something which is out of the ordinary. It is for a special, unique set of premises. It's a very restricted basis on which we're asking for this ability. And I think Arc Cinema's position and my position is that we understand that you'll either be with us on this, your Honours, or not. But we make the request in good faith. It's something we'd like to have the ability to do, and we'll be very interested to hear what your Honours make of it. And as I say, we understand that you'll either be with us on this or not, and that we're in your hands to that regard. In relation to the policy and exceptions to the policy, I suppose the final submission I would want to make to give your Honour some comfort on that front is that I think the sort of unique nature of the premises and the restricted nature of what it is we're actually asking for would hopefully, in my submission, give your Honours comfort that although it's an exception to the policy, it wouldn't be an application that would in any way defeat the policy or open the floodgates to other people because of the really unique nature of this set of premises. We're hoping that your Honours could give us this bit of flexibility on the merits of the case, and exceptions can occur. So your Honours, that's a very brief sort of explanation as to why we're looking for this. Obviously, I'll be very happy to take any questions you might have for me, and as I say, we understand that you may be with us, you may not be, and we'll be very interested to hear your views. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGowan. Can I ask you to mute your microphone? Yes, you've just done that when not speaking. And I'm going to ask members if they have any questions to ask you. And I see we have a question from Mr. Forsyth first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr. McGowan. Just to be clear, and I thank you for your letter of explanation, would the premier events that we're discussing be the sort of thing that would be live streamed from the USA? And some of the reasoning behind some of your thinking would be to adopt or to reconcile the 6-hour differences or the 8-hour differences, depending on which side of the US you are on. And, you know, is that the sort of story that you're selling us?
No, in fact, Councillor Forsyth, thank you for your question, but it's not really to deal with live streaming in relation to the hour differential between the US. It's purely to offer, as many cinemas do, midnight showings and late night showings of big movie events. So for example, the example I gave you was the new Bond movie. When it finally arrives with us, it's been delayed twice, I believe now, as a result of the pandemic. But there'll be significant interest in that movie because of what it is, and it being a sort of big popular event. It really is something that the cinema wants to offer as an event. You know, it's not just you're going to see a movie, it's a big event, it's a premiere. And there's something I think quite special about going to a midnight showing of a movie that takes it out of the ordinary. So it's not necessarily for streaming live at the same time as things that happen in America. It's purely based on what we believe people in the local area would like to see is a really sort of special cinema experience. Going in at midnight, getting your popcorn and maybe a beer, watch the movie, find out how James Bond gets on, and away you go.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan, for that explanation. That clarifies it most significantly. I just add to that my last premiere was whiskey galore, and unfortunately there was no drink available. Thank you, sir.
Ironic.
Noted.
Okay, next question is from Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you very much, convener, and thank you, Mr. McGowan. This is an exciting application, as you've said, for a variety of reasons. You've mentioned how it's unique, and what a fitting venue that Peterhead is the locus here, the birth home for an increasingly popular film director and producer in its own right. Many of us have watched during the COVID period the recent Laurel and Hardy film that was part of the catalogue of films produced and directed by the local born Peterhead producer. I really wondered if you can add a little bit of context that will help us in terms of the exceptional nature of the application and the 3 AM request. I fully see where you're coming from in relation to the premieres of things like the Bond film, but I'm wondering also whether you might look at films with a particular local attachment or regional attachment or even Scottish attachment. And can you add something at all regarding the marketing that will take place and the advanced promotion, if you like, of the films that you would have in mind? So is there anticipated that there will be ticket sales in advance, for example? So a little bit more information about the marketing would be very helpful. And it's wonderful with regard to the 12 new jobs. And I think, subject to further consideration of this application, it's obviously something that's going to be good for Peterhead and good for employment in Peterhead. But if you can add a bit of context regarding the marketing regarding this really exciting project, please. Thanks.
Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, can I say I'm very grateful to you for those positive comments that you made in terms of the generality of the application. The manager's obviously here and listening to this, so I'm sure she'll be very pleased to hear that general support in relation to the cinema. So thank you for that. In relation to your queries about the 3 AM extension, I've given the Bond movie as an example, but of course what we would want to do is to provide movies, not just big Hollywood blockbuster movies, but all sorts of movies, and your honours will probably be well aware, perhaps from being cinema goers yourself, that there is a significant amount of popularity in showing old movies on the cinema screen to get that cinema experience. A really good example of that might be showings of, for example, It's a Wonderful Life over the Christmas period. And that could be something that would be used in this case, where you have a midnight showing of, for example, It's a Wonderful Life, which is not a big Hollywood blockbuster, but it's a very popular movie, especially at that time of year. And absolutely, we would also want to be showing local independent movies. I'm grateful for you recognising the local reference that you made there, Councillor, and the answer to that is yes. I think that one of the things that ARC Cinemas want to do here is to support the local communities, and Your Honours may see that I tried to tease some of this out in the wording of the operating plan, so I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but when Your Honours examine this, you'll see that I did recognise this in the operating plan. There is reference to live performances and receptions, which I go on to clarify is, for example, where a local director or producer or actor would come to the cinema to sort of present the movie and stand up at the front of the screen and maybe give a 5-10 minute talk ahead of the actual movie being shown. So I hope that comes through in relation to the wording that I've added in. That was something that I spoke with the police about as well. And it definitely is a part of what we want to achieve here. So it's not just the big Hollywood blockbusters, it's movies of a special nature that could be locally produced movies, independent movies, as well as the big guys. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And as you say, that adds to the unique nature of the application. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Ms. Harper.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for your detailed submission so far. And this absolutely is a unique application, and it's always welcomed to see something unique, and I hope it is successful today. My question really is just to seek an assurance, given that this is looking for a 3 AM licence, and there are other premises within the vicinity who obviously their licence is only till 1, I'd want to seek an assurance that the cinema won't become a further drinking destination, as opposed to it, as you've detailed, that it really is about the cinematic experience. But it's just while we're thinking about the licensing board objectives around public safety, public nuisance, etc., it's really just an assurance that it's not going to be the 3M licence isn't going to be taken advantage for the wrong reasons, and it really is just going to be about the cinematic experience. I hope I've explained that well, and it is just an assurance that I'm seeking at the moment.
I take that point entirely, Councillor Harper. It's a perfectly valid observation. I think if you look at the wording, which again I've hopefully indicated correctly in the actual application, you will see that there is at least one use of the word ancillary. And I've made use of that word in my submissions to you this morning as well. There is absolutely no doubt from our side that the alcohol sales are ancillary in the true sense of the word to the cinematic experience. The ARC Cinemas estate has a number of other licensed premises, not in Scotland, as I said. This is the first one in Scotland, but they have a number of other licensed cinemas in England and in Ireland. And the actual amount of alcohol which is sold is extremely modest. You know, the majority of the money that's spent is by buying the tickets and the popcorn or the juice. The actual alcohol sales are extremely modest in the other cinemas, and that would be the experience that they would expect to see with Peterhead as well. I think I can give you that assurance, Councillor Harper, verbally, but you also have the reference to that wording in the actual application that I've lodged. Your Honours also have sight of the licensing objective statement which we've prepared and submitted, which again makes reference to the ancillary nature of the actual alcohol consumption. Worth bearing in mind, I think, Councillor Harper, just to finish off in this response to your question, there's no bar, there's no restaurant. The only consumption that's permitted is in the auditorium as ancillary to watching the movie. I hope that gives you the comfort you're looking for, Councillor.
Absolutely, I did notice the wording that you had used, and I really welcome the answer that you've given here today. It's appreciated, and I do see that as an assurance to my question, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And there's a question from Mr. Calder.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener, and thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. As a Peterhead Town Centre resident and councillor, I very much welcome this application. It's as other councillors have mentioned, it's a very exciting application where it's a very welcome facility for the town of Peterhead. It really has added to the town centre experience here already. Unfortunately, with the lockdown, it's been closed part of the time. We'll look forward to it being reopening and for this application to go ahead. I fully agree with what other councillors have said, that the special event premiere movies could be an exciting thing, up to, as you say, up to 6 times in a calendar year. And I was there for the official opening, and John Baird, who's the director of Stan and Ollie, was there to open the cinema. A former pupil of mine, I may add, at Meat Hill Primary School and Peterhead Academy. So he's an ex-pupil of mine, and he's presently making a new film of Tetris, I believe, set in Aberdeen, partly. So I look forward to that being shown in the local cinema there as well. So very much appreciate what you're doing and fully support your application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. I just have a question as well. Ticket sales, will you be able to sell tickets in advance, or can people buy tickets on the night, or how's that going to work for these bigger events?
Definitely tickets will be able to be booked in advance, convener. I mean, I think for most people now, that's the norm rather than the exception. I know from my own experience going out to the cinema with my good lady, we would book tickets in advance, and a lot of people now use apps and online solutions to book their seats in advance, and you have the ability to pick your seat, the actual seat you want to sit in. That's actually something which I think is relevant in this case, because it's something I have my own experience of. My wife sometimes has difficulty walking, and we tend to try to book the accessible seats. I mentioned earlier on that the cinema screens are accessible, and there are special positions for people who don't have great mobility, and I think that's something which is really good to see in a premises like this, and it gives that added flexibility of people knowing that they can go into the cinema in comfort, knowing that they have that ability to book a particular seat. Perhaps I might flippantly say, for light-hearted reasons, Madam Convener, some people might want to book the back row in the cinema, and I'll leave that to your imagination.
Thank you for that. I don't see any further indications of questions for you, Mr. McGowan, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to make your closing remarks. No new evidence can be brought in at this point, and also once you've made your concluding remarks, you won't be entitled to speak again unless it's to answer a question from a board member. Okay, so if you've got any concluding remarks, Mr. McGowan, go ahead.
Thank you, Convener. I don't think I've got anything additional to add. I think your honours know where I'm coming from. You've heard what I've had to say, and I think the questions have been useful because they've ventilated the reason behind the application. So I'm grateful to those, because I'm hoping that they will have been of some help. Your honours, I think you know what I'm seeking here. As I said in my original submission, I know that we're asking for an exception. We do believe it is an exceptional request, and we know that you'll either be with us or not with us. And either way, we know that we have your general support. So we're in your hands, and I think that's as much as I have to say. But thank you for your consideration.
Okay, can I now ask board members whether they require any legal advice from the clerk today? Members satisfied that they have information?
Yeah, no, I've got all we need.
Yeah.
I'm certainly satisfied, Convener, that we have sufficient. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
agreed.
In that case, we can move on to, do you need to debate the information you've heard? Any more comments to make?
No.
I'm content to move on.
Okay. In that case, I can confirm you've heard enough information and evidence upon which to make a decision, and we can move on. I think I could call for a motion. I don't see any indication so far. Councillor Calder?
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. I'll be very pleased to move the motion in support of this application, which includes up to 6 events with a licence up to 3 AM. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Calder. Oh,
sorry, Chair, can I confirm that is with the specific condition proposed by the applicant to notify the police and the LSO a month in advance, or are you happy? Yeah, including condition.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Calder.
Thank you.
Mr. Argyle, do you wish to second?
Yes, very happy to second that. I was reflecting that when we wrote the policy, there were no private sector independent cinemas in Aberdeenshire. So the issue of licensing for cinemas never occurred. It never arose, and indeed this is the only such cinema in Aberdeenshire. And I think there is a good case that has been made by Mr. McGowan for an exception to the policy. That I note there have been no objections to it, and the condition proposed to give 1 month's notice I think is eminently sensible. I'm content that this application fully complies with the licensing objectives, and I think an exception to our policy on this in this instance is entirely justified and one I would support. My apologies for not turning my video on for some reason, probably to spare you all that's refusing to come on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Argyle. Comment from Mr. Forsyth.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And like Mr. Argyle, my camera refuses to go on, and whether that's a good thing or not is entirely up to you. But I certainly agree with the proposer and seconder in their sentiments of this particular application, and I think it's exciting from the point of view that it's not only the only one in Aberdeen, it's Aberdeenshire, it's the only one in Scotland, and so hopefully that's a bit of a pathfinder. And you know, I'm very happy with this application and would seek to follow my colleagues and approve it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Is there an amendment to the motion? I don't see any indication. In that case, can I get the Deputy Clerk just to confirm the motion?
Can I just ask if, and silence will indicate accord, if the board is unanimous in that decision? I'll take silence as yes. So yes. The board's decision today, Mr. McGowan, is the application has been granted as applied for, with the 3 AM granted as a justified departure to policy, with the condition that you proposed of notifying the police and the LSOs a month in advance of the 6 dates that you intend to use that. It's a provisional premises licence, so I look forward to receiving the confirmation in due course.
Thank you, Fiona, and if I can just say, Your Honours, if you'd indulge me just for a moment, thank you for your support with the application. The comments and questions and general support have been refreshing to hear. My clients will be delighted with the decision today, so thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in the real world one day once we get back to in-person hearings as well.
Yes, indeed, that's a sentiment echoed, I think, every day. Thank you very much.
All the best, everyone.
I can confirm this hearing is now concluded. Thank you for your interest in this business, and I will now ask you, Mr. McGowan and the manager, to leave the meeting. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I just confirm that both Mr. McGowan and, I've forgotten the lady's name, the manager, have both left the meeting, and we can go on to the next item on the agenda?
Yes, Chair, I can confirm that they've both left the meeting.
Okay. Moving on to item 8. Review of premises licence, the paper shop in Ellen. I don't think the licence holder is in attendance today, so we don't need to, they've indicated they're not attending, so they won't be admitted to the meeting.
Chair, we've had no contact with the licence holder whatsoever since asking them to attend the board, so there will be no licence holder in attendance today, and we have Trevor Lackey as the LSO in attendance.
Okay.
Do you want me to introduce the report, Chair?
Yes, and confirm the procedure.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for review of a premises licence for the paper shop at Ellen. The reason for the review, which has been brought by the LSO, is the premises have failed to pay their annual fee. There's a preliminary matter here in that the board should first of all determine whether it deems the licence to have ceased to have effect in terms of Section 28 of the 2005 Act. Now, the board's policy stipulates that in normal trading times, that if a premises cease to be used for the sale of alcohol for a period of 3 months or more, the board will deem the licence has ceased to have effect, and there is an ability to apply to the board to have a continuation of closure in justified cases. The coronavirus regulations do provide that Section 28 will not apply to a closure if the closure is related to reasons of coronavirus. However, in this case, the premises was closed prior to coronavirus, and the licence holder has given no reasoning to the board or to the licensing standards officer that the ceasing to trade in the premises is as a result of coronavirus. So as a preliminary matter, Chair, I would ask the board to first determine whether or not they are of the view that the licence is still in effect or whether it has ceased to have effect under Section 28. If you deem the licence is still in effect, we would go on to consider the application for review. If, however, you deem the licence to have ceased to have effect, there will be no licence to review, and that will end the action that the board requires to take on this matter. So perhaps the board wishes to consider that preliminary matter first. I'm sure Mr. Lackey will be able to review, if you require it, the nature of the contact that he has had with the licence holder on this issue prior to the review being lodged, if you require it.
Okay, thank you. Do members wish to hear from Mr. Lackey first? Mr. Argyle.
Thank you, and thank you to Mr. Lackey for being present to answer any questions. I think actually, from my point of view, there's sufficient evidence and information in the report that we have in front of us. I don't know if you want a motion at this point, Convener, but it seems to me that that evidence clearly demonstrates that the licence has ceased to have effect in terms of Section 28 of the 2005 Act, and I think we should proceed accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I would concur with that sentiment, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Ms. Harper?
Yeah, I was just going to agree as well.
Yeah.
I agree with what's been previously said.
Okay. I don't see any other alternative view on that, so I think it's fair to say, members, that we're agreeing that the licence has ceased to have effect.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
So the decision of the board is that the licence has ceased to have effect under Section 28 of the Act. Therefore, there is no licence to review. Therefore, the review application is no longer requires to be considered. But we thank Mr. Lackey for lodging that application and bringing it to the board's attention. That concludes this report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We will be scheduling in some comfort breaks, but I think we can carry on for now with the next item, which is an application for an occasional licence at Z's Nightclub, Stonehaven. It's item 9.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for an occasional licence for an outdoor area next to a nightclub in Stonehaven. There have been representations made to the application by the police and the licensing standards officer, and also by members of the public. Before you proceed to verify who is present, can I please advise the board that Christopher Simmers has advised that he is not able to attend today, and Mr. and Mrs. McEwen have also advised that they are not able to attend. They have not given us further written submissions. the fact that they are not in attendance does not mean that their representations can't be taken into account. Their representations can, but there's no additional information from those parties available for the board as part of the hearing. And Chair, you should confirm that the other parties are present as per the board's procedure.
Sorry, muted myself again. Just for those in attendance today, please note the board meeting will be recorded and published online for public viewing after the meeting. We've had the procedure confirmed. Can I just check that people are in attendance today? Is Janet Hood present? Can you confirm, please, Ms. Hood?
Yes, I am in attendance. Thank you.
Are you satisfied that you've received all of the relevant information and you feel able to participate in the determination of the application?
Absolutely, thank you.
Christopher Shimmers, we know, isn't present today. Can I confirm if William and Pauline McEwen are present? I think they're not.
They're not in attendance, Chair.
No, they're not attending either. Can I confirm Sergeant Jill Flett is present?
Yes, I'm present, thank you.
And are you satisfied that you've received all of the relevant information and do you feel able to participate in the determination of the application?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can I confirm if Keith Simpson, the Licensing Standards Officer, is present?
Yes, I am, Chair.
And are you satisfied that you've received all the relevant information and you feel able to participate in the determination of the application?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Chair, there was a preliminary matter in that late letters of support were lodged late yesterday afternoon. The applicant's agent did indicate to me this morning that she did not wish to proceed with those, but it would be prudent to ask her to confirm that that is the case.
Ms. Hood?
I don't see that the letters which I received yesterday will add much to my presentation, to be perfectly honest. It has been noted that they have been received, and I believe that will suffice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just in line with the guidance that you've all received in the public participant meeting protocol for the Licensing Board hearings, please can you mute your microphone if possible when not speaking. And please do not speak unless I invite you to do so, and obviously not interrupting other speakers or you may be removed from the meeting. And once you get to your concluding remarks, you're not entitled to speak again unless to answer a question from a board member. And then once the board has made its decision, you'll be asked to leave the meeting. If the board does adjourn to deliberate the application, the recording of the meeting will be paused and the board will retire to a separate online meeting room. And if everyone else just waits in the main meeting until the board members return, and I will restart the meeting at that point, and the recording will also be restarted. So given that we've discussed the preliminary issue of the late letters, I could invite Janet Hood to address the board, please.
Thank you very much, convener members. It's lovely to be back before my home board. I'd just also like to send my best wishes, please, to Councillor Topping for a swift recovery and look forward to seeing him back in harness. I'm representing my client, Sujath Ali, who's known to most, including his customers and myself, as Z. Mr. Ali usually employs some 10 people part-time, and this will rise to 20 depending on the success of the beer garden. Mr. Ali's made an application for an occasional licence for a beer garden in the yard lying to the side of the premises known as Z's Nightclub. The yard is situated behind the premises known as Troopers, which is a public house and sits between Barclay Street and Ann Street in Stonehaven. My client is the owner of the area of ground on which it is proposed to host the beer garden and has a servitude right of access for pedestrians and vehicles from and to Ann Street. However, this access and egress would only be used by customers of the beer garden should the application be granted for an emergency exit, and this has been agreed with Your Honour's Licensing Standards Officers, Keith Simpson, and I would like to thank Keith at this point for all the help he's given my client on this matter. The title deeds confirm that no vehicles can be parked permanently on the yard, which is the subject of the application, and the yard is not a car park. This is alleged in one of the letters of objection before Your Honours this morning. I checked this with my client's conveyancing solicitor, and she sent me a copy of the disposition and the conditions of that. The application is to permit my client to run a beer garden within the boundary of his yard. This activity was actually undertaken by neighbouring premises troopers operators last year, with no issues arising. My client permitted the owner of troopers to carry out the activity, and I have confirmed this with Mr Simpson. No application was required by Your Honours, as you have a very fair system in Stonehaven of permitting this type of use by operators of premises for areas adjacent to the licensed premises, and you generally permit the use of external parts of the premises, and indeed the public premises, as can be shown, say, at the harbour and the market bar, and possibly elsewhere in the town. There was no reason for an application to be made last year for a beer garden, because Troopers holds a premises licence permitting the sale of alcohol during normal licensing hours commencing at 11 o'clock. The activity last year caused no upset to neighbours. The objectors to this application are neighbours, and no complaints were made and no issue was raised. Again, I confirmed that with your licensing standards officer. My client, however, requires to apply for an occasional licence, not because of the use of the area necessarily, but because the premises licence, which is adjacent to it and which he owns, is a nightclub, and its opening hours commence at 7 o'clock. I vaguely recall from my days when Your Honours Council employed me that the original hours for these premises were normal pub hours, but these changed when the premises were turned into a nightclub. Unfortunately, I can't remember the date that occurred. Had my client's premises licence had normal operating hours for a public house commencing at 11, no application would have been required. Now, Your Honours obviously are aware that beer gardens operate best during the day and during the evening, hence the application being from 11 o'clock till 10 o'clock daily. There is no intention and no request to operate later. Last orders will be taken at 9:30 to ensure patrons leave the site on time. Access will be through the nightclub. It will be monitored in terms of COVID, and egress will be through the nightclub and out, except in the case of emergency. Now, as Your Honours Clerk has kindly said, there are two objections to the application. Both of the objectors appear to believe that the application is to bring nightclub activities into the beer garden, which is of course not the case. And to further protect neighbours from noise, my client has applied for the occasional licence without access by under 18s, because we do know that under 18s and children can occasionally disturb neighbours. There will be no music, amplified or otherwise, played within the premises, and that's included the outside area, and any lighting will be directed towards the ground to prevent light pollution. The toilets within the nightclub will be used, and COVID monitoring, of course, will occur with that. Patrons will be required to be seated, and orders will be taken by staff, and the orders will be delivered to the seated patrons. Now, I'll deal with the objections in the order that they are presented on Your Honours' report. The first objection is from Mr Simmers, who appears to be making a complaint about patrons leaving the nightclub, and this would be normally in the early hours of the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock, depending on which day it is. The beer garden, as I say, will not be used past 10 o'clock, which is some 4 or 5 hours before the nightclub would have closed, and it is my submission that these comments are irrelevant to this application. I have, as far as I've been able to ascertain, that there are no verifiable complaints made to any party with regard to my client's mechanism of running his premises. The complainer goes on to state he's concerned that music will blast out in the application premises, that is the yard. No music of any type, amplified or acoustic, will be permitted on the premises. This is in terms of COVID and Your Honours' policy in terms of utilising an outside area, especially within built-up areas. Finally, the objector has failed to link the application to the 5 objectives and has not really considered what my client has applied for. And I would ask you to dismiss Mr Simmers' objection as being irrelevant. The second objection is from Mr. and Mrs. McEwen, and again they do not address the current application or the 5 objections. The area is not a parking area, as I have explained. The title deeds prevent parking on the site. They were obviously not impacted by the use of the area as a beer garden last year when troopers were running a beer garden, and they don't even refer to the fact that happened. And that seems to say that they were unaware of the use, which is good, as this shows that the use can occur with no issues for neighbours. The remainder of the objection makes reference to claims about the client's running of the premises nightclub, which of course have no bearing on the application before your honours today. My client has run Z's nightclub for 10 years and at no time has any negative action been taken against him. My client is a compliant and caring premises licence holder and premises manager. You're aware obviously that Z's nightclub, as all nightclubs, have not been open since March last year and are unlikely to open until the autumn of this year if it's, and it is impossible to second guess this, the progress of COVID goes according to plan and there is less of it about. My client has presented your honours with a vulnerability policy and an appropriate 5 objectives risk assessment. He has skills in this industry and has not come before your honours for a negative reason. If this application is granted, I am instructed to make an application for a suite of occasional licences to take my client through the summer months. There were no issues when these premises were used as a beer garden last year. There are no reasons, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the legislation, that this application should be refused. The law is as stated by your honours clerk and the reasons for refusal are as stated by her. I don't believe that there are any particular reasons for refusal which have been identified. There are no inconsistencies with the 5 objectives. I'm not going to iterate them. And the hours sought are within the bounds of your honours policy. Case law is on side in that your honours would have to have obviously proper and evidence reasons to refuse an application, and those reasons must relate to the 5 objectives. I know that you are fully aware of the impact of COVID closures on the hospitality industry, and I'm aware that this isn't relevant, but I do ask you to understand that my client, like so many other premises operators, has not been able to trade for over a year since March 2020. And in order for this business to survive, some income has to be made, and this beer garden would offer a lifeline for my client and his staff. I do ask your honours to consider this application on its merits, to grant the application and permit a fast-track application for the following occasional licence application, should the application be granted, so there will be continuous operation of the beer garden through the summer. And I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present this application.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hood. I now invite Sergeant Flett to speak to the Chief Constable's representation. Sergeant Flett.
Yes, thank you. Our response was subject to the government guidance or measures in place at the time of the time scale applied for in respect of COVID-19, and we made recommendation that where there was no existing delineation or boundary, the area to be delineated by barrier or similar, and for no amplified music to be played within the licensed area. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Flett. Can I ask the Licensing Standards Officer, Keith Simpson, to speak to his representation now, please?
Yes, good morning, convener and board members. This application seeks the grant of an occasional licence for ground adjacent to Z's nightclub at 12 Barclay Street, Stonehaven. The ground is also situated behind the neighbouring licensed premises named Troopers Bar, which Mrs. Hood has alluded to previously. An occasional licence application was lodged on the 22nd of March 2021 by Mrs. Hood, acting as agent for Mr. Sujath Ali. The application sought permission for the sale of alcohol and disposable glasses for the consumption from the temporary bar set up within the area. The duration of the licence was to commence on Monday the 26th of April 2021 for 14 days until Sunday the 9th of May. The times for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises is sought from 11 AM till 10 PM daily. On the 1st of April 2021 I submitted a representation which is in the board's papers at Appendix 3. Primarily, my representation, should the board see fit to grant the licence, was to recommend local and additional conditions, as well as all mandatory conditions under the Act. If you'll just bear me just a few minutes to go through those conditions, just to let you know what they are. So first of all, the local conditions I sought to apply was that the licence holder or the nominee and sufficient responsible persons are present throughout the event, or in this case throughout the licensing hours, to ensure its safe conduct and compliance with the Licensing Scotland Act 2005. All staff must be aware of their responsibilities under the Licensing Scotland Act. Bar staff must be able to identify and refuse service of alcoholic beverages to drunken persons. And all staff employed in the sale or supply of alcohol must have received staff training to the standard provided in the Licensing Scotland Act 2005, Schedule 3, Para 6, and evidence of this must be provided to the satisfaction of the LSO prior to the occasional licence taking effect. In addition to those local conditions, I also wish to apply that access and egress to the licensed area should be via Barclay Street, with provisions in place to allow for evacuation to Ann Street in the case of an emergency. Nightclub premises is only to be used for access, egress, toilet facilities, and to provide stock for the outdoor bar. Outdoor areas must not be used for activities linked to the sale of alcohol or consumption of alcohol after 2200 hours. The licence holder must take reasonable steps to ensure that litter and, where used, glass and bottles removed from the outdoor area on a regular basis. The licence holder should consider the use of safe alternatives to glass containers and bottles in outdoor drinking areas. And there should be no amplified music or noise emitted from the use of microphones, speakers, or other forms of entertainment within the outdoor drinking area. The final two conditions I'd like to apply is that all outside areas to be table service only, and there should be no outdoor structures in the licensed area. Portable umbrellas can be used to provide shelter from the elements, but these should be removed and stored when not in use. My understanding is that Mrs. Hood, as the applicant's agent, is happy to accept all the conditions recommended. Turning to the actual objections and representations, appendices 4 and 5, I understand that there may be concerns, particularly in relation to noise, from residents in what is a mixture of commercial and residential area in the centre of Stonehaven. I wish to make the board aware, however, that the area sought to be licensed happens to be owned by Mr. Ali, but does not form any part of the licensed footprint of Z's nightclub. The application before the board today relates to a standalone piece of land. It therefore follows that any representation in relation to the operation of Z's nightclub is not relevant to the application, as it is applied for as a totally different operation. As a consequence, I've tried to apply conditions which seek to mitigate the concerns of the neighbours, in particular no amplified music or noise emitted from the outdoor drinking area. Mrs. Hood, in her submission, has advanced the argument that the area to be licensed was used last summer with Mr. Ali's permission by the owner of the neighbouring Troopers Bar. I can confirm that between the 15th of July and 9th of October, the area was used by patrons from Troopers Bar by way of buying a drink in the premise, taking it outside where approximately 5 tables and 20 chairs were situated. I can also confirm that during this period there were no issues brought to my attention. However, this was sporadic use and it was weather dependent, and there was a much smaller scale than what is being proposed in this application. In summary, I have concerns about noise emanating from the licensed area. However, I have no evidence at this time on which to rely on to make any objection. Accordingly, I am attempting to apply conditions to try and mitigate any possible disturbance in the vicinity of the licensed area. The application, if granted, will last for a maximum of 14 days initially, with the intention for more dates to follow. As a consequence, I can assure the board that if minded to grant, the area will be monitored by myself, and any issues can either be resolved swiftly or can be returned to the board in the event of non-compliance. That is my submission and submitted for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simpson. Can I ask Mrs. Hood, do you want to respond to any of the points raised by either Sergeant Flett or Mr. Simpson?
Yes, please, Convener. It's just to confirm the Licensing Standards Officer's comments that the applications are in 2-week tranches. So if there were any difficulties whatsoever, they would not be granted moving forward into the future. And I would ask your honours to note that last year's troopers' use of the outside area, while smaller, caused no difficulty whatsoever, and that my client has agreed to all the conditions proposed by both the police and the licensing standards officer with regard to control. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any questions that they wish to ask any of the parties? Mr. Hutchison.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Mrs. Hood to clarify? She said that Mr. Simmers hadn't linked his objection to the licensing objectives. If I read page 186 of our pack, he's concerned about noise being generated, although he did put a comment about music and tunes. I would submit that he was referring to noise generated from people speaking, laughing, etc., which, if that was the case, would be linked to one of the objectives of preventing public nuisance.
Mrs. Hood, do you want to respond?
I would like to respond. Thank you very much, Mr. Hutchin, for your comments. The objection by Mr. Simmers says that tenants have complained in the past for noise from the turning out time at the nightclub, and he has not actually referred to any concerns with noise during the day. He does appear to have related this solely to nightclub use, and as the licensing standards officer has said, this application is actually not related to the use of the nightclub per se. It is only in respect of a beer garden which will not be following nightclub hours. Thank you.
If I could come back, Chair.
Yes.
Right. Well, on page 186 of our pack, he states that he's concerned about the rear bedrooms, as he owns, he's a landlord of 12A and 12B Barclay Street. So I think there was two. He did initially object to the nightclub, which we could, which he linked to preventing crime and disorder. But the second objection was linked to preventing public nuisance with the noise concern. So it was just to say to Mrs. Hood that I don't think we should. Well, I'm of the opinion we shouldn't dismiss this objection. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, any further questions? I don't see any indications. Do board members require legal advice from the clerk at this point?
Chair, concluding remarks before this point in reverse order.
Yes.
So that would be Keith Simpson,
Mr. Simpson,
Sergeant Flett and Janet Hood to finish up with, Chair.
Yes, apologies. I jumped on a bit there. Mr. Simpson, do you have any concluding remarks?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add other than the fact that my viewpoint would be that because these are subject to occasional licences, if you were minded, or if the board were minded to grant, I would put in some form of factors to ensure that there are any issues that are brought to my attention. We would kind of nip in the bud. If there was any issues going forward and the residents had concerns, if they come to me and make me aware of them, we can look at them. So really that's the sum and substance of it. I think we need to treat this on its own merits and see where we go.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant Flett, do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Hood, and can I just remind you, no new evidence can be added at this point. Concluding remarks, please.
Thank you. I do hope your honours will look on this sympathetically. The beer garden ran successfully last year with no issues. The applications run in 2-week tranches, so they're very easy to control. I know that Mr Simpson does have his finger on the pulse of Stonehaven and would be there to deal with any issues should any arise, though I'm not anticipating any, and I do move the grant and hope that you will permit a fast track of further occasional licence applications should you grant this application to enable a smooth running of the premises. Thank you.
Thank you. So I can resume to my question. Do members require any further legal advice from the clerk?
No.
I think we have sufficient information, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to retire to deliberate?
Not
I don't
personally.
see any indications.
No.
No.
Okay. Are we ready to debate the information heard? Or I see Mr Hutchinson as is ready to propose a motion.
No, Chair, thank you. I was concerned about the noise aspect with the patrons laughing and whatever they do when they're drinking. But I think on balance, Mr Simpson has reassured me that he will keep an eye on the situation, and I would be content to grant this occasional licence.
Okay, thank you. And I see Mr Argyle is offering to second. Mr Argyle?
Yeah, happy to second that, Convener. I think Mrs Hood has put forward a good argument, and we have the support of Mr Simpson and Sergeant Flett, so that's all very positive. I certainly looked with sympathy at the objections that we received, and I take the point absolutely that both of them refer to the nightclub rather than this beer garden, and I also note that troopers used the ground last year, and as Mr Simpson has confirmed, there were no issues as a result of that. So I think the fact that we're granting this as a temporary 14-day permission, it will be monitored. That safeguards the situation, because if there are any issues, it is any further applications will have to come back to the board. So it's clearly in the interest of the applicant to ensure that there are no issues as a result. So taken all in all, I'm perfectly content with the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A comment from Mr Forsyth?
Yes, I agree with the proposer and seconder. I think we can be sympathetic to this application. I think Mrs Hood's submission was a strong one, and in some regard was supported by the LSO. And I think the checks and balances in this particular case, which clearly stands on its own merit, are sufficient to give us comfort as a board to allow this application to proceed with all the conditions applied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just confirm that members have received sufficient evidence upon which to make a decision before I go to the Deputy Clerk?
Yeah, I'm happy with the conditions of the information that we received, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Agreed.
Is there any amendment? I don't see any mention of an amendment. No. Deputy Clerk, can you just confirm the motion, please?
Yeah, the commotion. I'll put my teeth back into here. The motion is to grant the application as applied for with the recommended conditions. There's no amendment. I will take silence as being a unanimous decision. So the decision is passed unanimously. Mrs Hood, the application has been granted and your client will get his licence. And to explain for all the information of all parties in the same way as we are doing for all other licensees at the current time, we do accept block applications for occasionals to cover such outdoor areas, but we only grant them one at a time in the run-up to when they're required to enable us to take into account any issues that arise, and as Keith Simpson referred to, nip them in the bud to try and ensure that these businesses can continue to trade. So we will be doing exactly the same here, that Janet can lodge block applications. They'll be processed, but they'll only be granted one at a time so that any concerns can be addressed. And that brings us to the end of this report, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Very much for listening to my presentation and granting this, my client will be extremely relieved. And I do hope you have a lovely rest of the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hood. Can I just confirm that this hearing has now concluded? Thank you all for your interest in this business. And I will ask you to leave the meeting, those who are in attendance for this item, and we can progress on to the next item on the agenda. Although I would, looking at the time, suggest that we have a short break and maybe resume again at 11:50.
Chair, I would appreciate that because I will need to bring the applicant in for the next hearing by phone, so that'll give me time to bring them in. So I'd appreciate a break.
Do you want to go 11:55 then? Would you like 11:55?
And I'm in the hands of the board.
Yeah.
11:55 would be good, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
11:55. Okay, we'll see you back then. Thank you.
Jenny, could you pause the live streaming, and I will now pause the recording. The recording is paused.
Okay, thank you.
And that's us back recording and back live, Chair. And we have Mark Dawson, the applicant for the Creelin, in the meeting with us as well, by phone.
Okay. Right, so that's item 10, application for an occasional licence for the Creelin at Carterlin.
Chair, this is an application for an occasional licence which has attracted a representation from a member of the public, which is why it's been referred to the board. There are also representations from Sergeant Flett and from Keith Simpson, the Licensing Standards Officer. I can confirm that Frances Buchanan, who lodged the representation, did advise us in advance that she wasn't able to be in attendance at the board today, but she did lodge written submissions which were forwarded to Mr Dawson, the applicant, and form Appendix 6 of your papers. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, can I just confirm, you said Mark Dawson is present today. Can I confirm Sergeant Jill Flett is still with us?
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
And Keith Simpson, Licensing Standards Officer.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Are you all satisfied that you've received the relevant information and you feel able to participate in the determination of the application?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Agreed.
So in line with the guidance you've received in the public participant meeting protocol for licensing board hearings, please can you mute your microphone when not speaking, if that's something you can do unless you're on the phone. Please do not speak unless I invite you to do so, and please do not interrupt the other speakers. If you do, you may be removed from the meeting. Once we get to your concluding remarks, you're not entitled to speak again unless to answer a question from a board member. And once the board has made its decision, you'll be then asked to leave the meeting. Okay, can I just invite Mark Dawson, please, to speak to the application?
Thanks, Convener, and good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mark Dawson, and it's my wife and I that own the Creelin. We are applying for the occasional licence as we have lost 50% of our capacity inside due to the social distancing and the restrictions placed on the hospitality industry regarding the no sale of alcohol inside. We have had only 4 months of trading in the last 12 months. Having this licence is essential to the survival of our business. We wish to use the car park for 8 tables for food and drink service. We believe there is ample space available for Mrs Buchanan to drive her car through the Crew Road as the seating area is on the opposite side of the car park on our land. Last year we received an occasional licence for outside dining, and outside dining was welcomed by visitors and residents of Carterline alike. We decided to put planters last year to separate the dining area and the through roads, and it worked well and guests kept the through road clear. There was the odd occasion that somebody did park there, but it was rectified as soon as possible. We kept the tables well within our boundary line of our land to give the local residents plenty of room to drive through and for health and safety. The objector has concerns about the bin collections as well. I've spoken to the Trade Waste Department at Aberdeenshire Council, and our bins used to be kept in the car park as well. But to make it easier for them, the bins have now been moved to the bottom of the hill, so it's easier for them to collect. And I would recommend that the residents would probably do the same thing as well. She has concern about this hill, so with cars parking there, I've put up signage stating 24-hour access is required and to keep clear, and the car park is closed so no customers drive up not knowing that it is closed. The objector is looking to get a turning spot in the car park. We did that last year. We allowed a turning spot for them on there's a chuckied area on the car park. We left that clear last year for turning. I sent a photo over of the area in question and I put a camper van in it to show how the size of it, and it's adequate for turning a small vehicle. I really hope the board grant us this licence today, and we can look forward to moving on from these lockdowns and surviving as a business. I thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dawson. I now invite Sergeant Flett to speak to the Chief Constable's representation.
Yes, thank you. Our response was subject to government guidance or measures in place at the time of the event in respect of COVID-19, and the conditions we sought were that there was to be, and if there was no existing delineation or boundary, the area to be so delineated by barrier or similar, and no amplified music to be played therein. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Flett. Can I ask Keith Simpson from Licensing Standards to speak to your representation?
Yes, Convener. Thank you, and board members. This application seeks to grant an occasional licence to use a car park owned and operated by the Creel Inn at Caterwin. An occasional licence application was lodged on the 22nd of March 2021 by Mrs Fiona Dawson, the premises licence holder. The duration of the licence sought is from the 29th of April to the 13th of May. The time for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises is from 12 noon till 10 p.m. daily. By way of background, in 2020 there were 6 occasional licences granted by the board under delegated powers for these premises, spanning a period from the 19th of June to the 11th of September. On the 1st of April 2020 I submitted a representation which is in the board's papers at Appendix 3. Primarily my representation, should the board see fit to grant the licence, was to recommend local and additional conditions as well as all mandatory conditions under the Act. To reiterate the local conditions that I mentioned in a previous hearing, local conditions 3, 6A and 6B and 16 were to be applied, with the additional conditions as follows. Outdoor areas must not be used for activities linked to the sale or consumption of alcohol after 2200 hours. The licence holder must take reasonable steps to ensure that litter and, where used, glass and bottles removed from outdoor areas on a regular basis. The licence holder should consider the use of safe alternatives to glass containers and bottles in the outdoor drinking area. There shall be no amplified music or noise emitted from the use of microphone speakers or other forms of entertainment within the outdoor drinking area, and all outside areas to be table service only. Turning to the representation made by Mrs Buchanan, I was contacted by her nearing the end of last summer to make me aware of her concerns about the access to her property and the turning area in the car park used as a beer garden. As we were nearing the end of the period at which the outside area could be used, she requested that she be made aware of any new applications for occasional licences at the Creel Inn be brought to her attention. In this particular case, I have been in contact with both the applicant, Mr Dawson, and the complainant, and offered mediation, as I consider that there could be possible resolution to the issues raised by Mrs Buchanan. I consider this to be primarily one of access and traffic management in a very small clifftop village. The mediation was declined by the applicant, hence the requirement for a board hearing. I am aware of the issues and know the lie of the land, so to speak, at the premises. I consider that the applicant understands his requirements to allow for vehicular access to numbers 15 to 18 and provides a turning space on a piece of gravel on the south side of the car park. Parking in the village is of a premium, but not something I would comment on in relation to this application. I have no further comment to make on the application other than to recommend the conditions I seek to apply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simpson. Mark Dawson, Mr. Dawson, do you want to respond to anything said by either Sergeant Flett or Mr. Simpson?
No, I don't, Convener.
Okay. Board members, have you got any questions for any parties? I'm not seeing any indication. Mr. Hutchison?
Just one question to Mr. Dawson. Obviously, when we get back to normal one day, that area will revert back to its normal use. Would that be what you would be envisaging?
Mr. Dawson?
Yes. Once the COVID is passed and we're trading as we previously were, it will be reverted back to the car park as it was previously.
Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've just got a question, Mr. Dawson, myself, just on the subject of parking. Where would customers potentially park to use this outdoor area?
Hi. The car park is quite small, so generally you'd only fit 4 cars in the car park on a normal times anyway. So there is street parking, and also there's the school has a good bit of land that we have an arrangement with the school that with school hours you can park there. It's about 300 yards, 400 yards away from the Creel Inn.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, we can move to concluding remarks. At this point, no new evidence can be brought in. In reverse order, if I start with Mr. Simpson.
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, Sergeant Flett.
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dawson.
Nothing else to add, thank you.
Nothing else to add. Do members feel they require any legal advice from the clerk at this point?
I'm content that we have sufficient convener. Thank you.
Thank you. Do the board wish to retire to deliberate? No indication. Okay.
No,
can I just confirm that members feel they've had enough information upon which to make a decision?
Confirm.
Agreed. Take silence as agreement. In that case, I'll call for a motion. Mr. Hutchison.
I was waiting for somebody else, but I'll happily propose that we accept this application and grant the occasional licence. I think it is a bit of inconvenience for the objector, but I think these difficult times we have to try and help businesses as much as we can, and for that reason it should be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Chair,
Mr. Friend, is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I would be happy to second the motion. I think, like previous applications, and again, we have sufficient checks and balances with it being an occasional application to review these things, and we have an LSO who, from time to time, keeps us advised of how all these occasional licenses are operating. So I would be content with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any indication of an amendment. No amendment proposed. In that case, Deputy Clerk, can you confirm the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm for the benefit of all parties that the Board has today granted the application with the recommended conditions. And can I ask Board members if that's unanimous? I'll take silence as being unanimous. And that's a unanimous decision. Mr Dawson, your licence will be issued in due course, and you will receive written notification of the decision within the next 7 days. And for Mr Dawson's benefit, it's the Board's normal practice at the current time to accept block applications for occasional licences for such areas, but we only grant them as required, so that if any issues do arise, they can be brought back before the Board and addressed and nipped in the bud very quickly. So thank you for attending today, Mr Dawson.
Thank you for your decision. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr Dawson. I can confirm that this hearing has now concluded, and thank you for your interest in this business. I will now ask you to leave the meeting. Okay. I see.
Chair, Mr Dawson has left the meeting, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we move on to item 11, date of next meeting.
Chair, the next meeting is in June. I'll just skim through to the date, the 23rd of June. Chair, I need to take you back to item 5. I now have the paperwork for Craig's Glen. That I can share on my screen with you.
Apologies. I should have noted.
No, that's what I'm here for. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Not yet, basically. Usually it's loading.
Is it there?
Yes, there it is.
Yes. So this is the missing application, Chair. I'm not sure what's happened on the website, but I pulled it off our system. So this is for West Craig's Glen near Turriff, and it's to provide alcohol for TP weddings and events for hire by couples, and this will be on a pre-booked basis as required between 12 noon and midnight 7 days a week. Now, there was substantial comment on this. Police Scotland queried the possibility of drinking in unlicensed areas of the venue. It's quite a large venue, but the layout plan submitted shows the 3 tents, teepees, to be raised within a specific area, and if they wish to move the teepees out with that area, they need to come back for a major variation to amend the licence, so these tents cannot be moved out with the area shown on the plan submitted with the application. The Licensing Standards Officer queried whether we actually needed an application. It was the applicant's intention initially to have the alcohol provided by outside caterers, but the applicant subsequently confirmed that it is their plan to allow both the use of outside caterers and to run the bar themselves, and they will use the licence to take responsibility for the sale of alcohol via the outside caterers. And they lodged amended layout plans and changed the operating plan accordingly. And the LSO also recommended conditions, and these are set out below. Building Standards confirmed that the occupancies of the 3 tents and recommended that at least 4 toilets be provided, with at least one of those being an accessible toilet. Environmental Health initially objected to the application because of long-term sustainability, the safety of the private water supply, and generally protecting the health of residents and visitors. But the applicant agreed to a condition regarding the supply of water at the venue, and the objection was subsequently withdrawn. And the noise management plan asked for by the servants is also being reflected in a condition. The fire service made their standard representation, and the certificate of compliance has been submitted. So in relation to this, the recommended local conditions are listed as numbers 1 through to 7. And the specific conditions here, importantly, are that the licence holder shall ensure that the premises are connected to a public water supply and shall not be connected to a private water supply, and the relevant licensing objective that relates to securing public safety. Temporary structures are not to be moved to alternative sites. So with those conditions, Chair, there are no other outstanding issues. The objection has been withdrawn and the application is recommended for approval. Chair, you're on mute.
No. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. The record, oh, it started again. Okay. Comment from Mrs. Sterling.
Yeah, thank you very much. The water supply, etc., have been done. How will we?
Can I just ask you to pause a minute because the meeting failed due to a network connection failure there. Just want to make sure everybody's back in.
No problem.
Yeah, it'd be helpful if Mrs. Stirling could start again, please. Like everybody else, I was locked out.
Yeah, I think everybody's back in now.
Yeah, the recording was going off and on, which I thought was odd, but it seems to be working again.
I think we're missing Mr. Calder. No, are you back with us, Stephen?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
1, 2,
I was only out for a few seconds.
7. Yeah, I think that's everybody back in. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, that's good. Mrs. Sterling, do you want to start again?
Yep, thanks very much. I was really just wanting to know what the sequencing of the events would be in terms of the grant of this application. Whilst the objections have been withdrawn, can we be assured that all the conditions have been met prior to the grant, or how does that work?
All conditions have been met except the public water supply, but the condition on the licence ensures that they cannot sell alcohol until there is that connection to the public water supply. So you've got the safeguard there. That's a condition that can be monitored and enforced by the LSOs, and if it's breached and enforcement notices are not complied with, the LSO can bring that back to the board as a review application. So I'm satisfied that there are sufficient safety precautions built in with the addition of those conditions. And as I say, the only one that is yet to be complied with is the public water supply one.
That was the one I was really most concerned about, but with the assurance you've given and the monitoring that will be in place, I think that's quite important. I'm content. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Along similar lines, I have a question as well. You said there in the conditions that they would need to provide 4 toilets. Are these portable facilities or access to building?
Those will be portable facilities, and I can certainly add that on as a condition if you feel that requires the. Oh, we've just lost the chair. I'll just hang on a minute, see if the chair rejoins us. I think we're obviously having connection issues now. If the chair doesn't rejoin, we'll need to appoint a pro temp chair for this remainder of this item.
Apologies, I dropped out the meeting there as well.
Well, that's okay, we noticed, so we were on pause. As I was saying, Chair, if you wish further not satisfaction, assurance, that can be added as a condition of the licence. Oh, we've lost Councillor Calder.
Very dodgy connection today. Yeah. I just think there's quite a number of people involved in these ceremonies. We need to have some sort of assurance that there's adequate toilet provision.
So you'd wish that added on as a condition?
I think so, yes.
Yep, happy to do that. If the board's in agreement?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
I think we've got everybody back now, Chair.
Okay. Right, so with those additional conditions, can I get Ms Stewart to read out what we've agreed to in terms of conditioning?
Okay, so I think we've lost some of our LSOs. I'm having trouble to get back in. The agreement is to grant as applied for with the recommended conditions as set in the report, and with the additional condition that the 4 toilets be provided, of which at least 1 must be accessible.
Okay. Members in agreement? Granted on that basis? Yes.
Chair,
Okay.
I'm not sure if the board wishes to revisit the matter of a vice convener, given what's happened with the chair. That would be our only other item of business, other than to say that there will be a special meeting of the board at some point in May to deal with the board's equality outcomes for the next 4 years, and I'll get that arranged as soon as I can.
Okay. Do board members wish to, I see a comment from Mr Argyle. Do you wish to discuss the prospect of a deputy convener?
It would seem sensible, convener. We did discuss it before.
Oh.
Goodness me, we've got gremlins.
Can I suggest we put it on the agenda for the? Can I suggest we put it on the agenda for the special meeting?
Yeah,
and hopefully our connection will actually allow everybody to stay put.
Happy to do that, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr Argyle has popped up again. Do you want to finish?
Yeah, sorry, I was thrown out as well. I mean, for a thing to happen in Torfins is a major scandal. So I missed what was just said. What I was going to say, if it's still relevant, was when we discussed the matter of a vice convener previously, it was felt not to be required. I think experience has shown that it actually is, and I think it would be very sensible to have a vice convener to cover for eventualities such as has unfortunately happened now with Mr. Topping being ill. I don't know whether it's appropriate, but it seems to me a sensible proposal to ask Mrs. Ewanson to carry on as deputy convener until the end of this council term, or until she chooses to do otherwise. But that would just cover us completely and make sure that the business of the board runs smoothly from here until the end of the council term. Thank you.
Through you, Chair.
I'll get you to come in and explain it yourself. Yeah.
Through you, Chair, I suggested that we actually have it as an agenda item for the special meeting, because that means the connections hopefully will be better and we're not losing people, and it's it's a clear discussion. I think we should consider it, and I think it should be an agenda item. Absolutely.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah, I think Anne is absolutely right. It should be considered. Just to be clear, my recollection of the conversation that we had previously was not so much that there wouldn't be a situation requiring the appointment of a vice chair. It was whether there was provision within the rules for the appointment of a vice chair, because it wasn't clear at all whether that was something facilitated in terms of governance and all the rest of it. There was clearly governance around the appointment of pro tems, but there didn't seem to be anything that made reference to the appointment of a vice chair. So it was a procedural point. But I think that in the current situation, clearly, Marion, let's consider it when we've got better connection, as Anne has mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, and I think I recall as well the issue around governance. At least if it's on the agenda for the next meeting, there's time to consider that properly. Mr. Forsyth.
Yes, yes. I don't think there's any need for a breakneck decision right now, and I would be content to have that as a formal motion, item in the next agenda. Thank you.
Okay,
happy to do that. We'll put that on the agenda for the special meeting in May, and I'll notify you all as soon as possible of the date of that.